Good evening, everybody. My name is Corky. I'm with Yolo Basin Foundation, and I want to welcome you this evening to our Flyway nights. I'm going to bring up our uh, slides so I can tell you what we're doing this evening. There we go. All right. So this evening, we're going to hear from Matt Stevenson, Putah Creek Streamkeeper. And he did mention that he does like to have questions orally at times. And so if you, I can't disable the waiting room and it's going to drive me crazy. So if you have questions, you can go ahead and unmute and interrupt him during the presentation, or you can put your comments or questions in chat. If it's in chat, we will read those to him at the end of the presentation. Next month will be our final Flyway nights for this round, and we're going to hear from Garrett Spann, our Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area Manager, where he's going to give information about the wildlife area, the work that the California Department of Fish and Wildlife has been doing, some of the special projects and restoration work out there, and other kinds of updates. Also got to throw in a plug for California Duck Days. It's amazing to me. It's just a month or a little over a month away. And that's just like amazing. And we are actively recruiting volunteers. So hopefully, some of you will not only want to join us as a participant, but maybe you will want to join us as a volunteer. We also have a survey out there right now about the t-shirts, colors, designs, that kind of thing. So if you're interested in that, our volunteer coordinator is putting all those pieces together. All right, so I'm gonna take down my screen and we're gonna pass over here to Max. All right, take it away, Max.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Max Stevenson. I'm the Putah Creek Streamkeeper, and I'm trying to get my presentation up here. There we go. I'm going to talk about uh, Putah Creek salmon in the Yolo Bypass, and I work for Solano County Water Agency, and I've given these types of talks before online and Zoom, and I love it when people interrupt me because I feel like I'm just talking to the computer right now. And so if you have any questions at all, just unmute yourself, say, Max, Max, I have a question. I'm sure you will because I always do. So let's get started. This is a Putah Creek salmon uh, in the hands of a researcher from UC Davis getting counted or genetically sampled. These are Chinook salmon, the king salmon, over 3 feet long, can be 30, 35 pounds, and thousands of them show up in Putah Creek around Thanksgiving, basically Halloween to Thanksgiving. And I'm going to try to have a format of what I'm talking about today. Corky said I had an hour, which is a really long time. So I started with 100 slides, and that's way too many. So now there's like 60, and that's still too many, but we'll get to what we can. And there'll be a lot of different topics, but the organization is we're going to try to go from the upper watershed at Lake Berryessa, through Winters, down through Davis, and then to West Sacramento, and also go back in time and come forward in time. I'll show some historical photos. But first, about the salmon life cycle, they're migratory. The babies hatch in the gravel up near Winters, and then they swim out to the ocean and spend 3 years out at the ocean, and then swim back as adults to start the cycle again. They lay their eggs and die. The main concept in their life cycle for the wildlife area for the Yolo Bypass is that this is their roadway. This is their passage out to the ocean and back. They go through the wildlife area to get where they're going as little tiny babies and as big adults coming back to lay their eggs. So to get a little overview of where Putah Creek is and how it pertains to the wildlife area, and we've got, I don't know if y'all can see my pointer. Can anyone see that? Maybe
Yeah,
some
we
of
can
the
see it.
Yeah.
Great. So here's Winters, Davis. Thank you. The red dotted line is Putah Creek. This shaded area is the Yolo Bypass. The wildlife area is, 17,000 acres or so in the middle, and Putah Creek goes right through the middle of it. Connects to the tow drain on the low side of the Yolo Bypass, goes out past Rio Vista, and that's how the salmon get in. The thousands, maybe 150,000 200,000 fall run Chinook show up in the fall, and most of them go up the Sacramento River on this blue line here. But some of them take this little left-hand turn, go up into the Cache Slough, up the tow drain, and then make a left up Putah Creek and spawn. Last year we had record numbers, over 2,000 uh, king salmon showed up, Chinook salmon. So starting at the top of the watershed, this is the Monticello Dam at Lake Berryessa. I took this photo with my iPhone. The trail, the hiking trail just goes right up and you can overlook the dam. It's quite spectacular. So that's the upper part of the watershed. My job starts where the water comes out of the dam, basically starts Putah Creek. And then going all the way down to the end of the creek, 32 miles away. This is Putah Creek right in the center there. And then this left to right, this is the tow drain. So this is what it looks like in the far east side of the Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area, and that's Putah Creek right in the middle. There's a pump for pumping water, and we'll talk about that a bunch too. So here's another map, just kind of giving you more of the scale. Over here is the little tip of Lake Berryessa here, and West Sacramento, Davis, Winters. This is part of a project that we did getting surveying the terrain, surveying the channel with using LiDAR from an airplane. But basically, it's 32 miles from Lake Berryessa down to the tow drain, and inside this purple line is almost 11,000 acres. So it's a large area. We've got 150 landowners on Putah Creek. Some of the larger landowners, UC Davis owns about 7 miles of creek. The wildlife area, there's about 3 miles. They're owned by the state. The city of Davis owns a couple spots. City of Winters owns a couple spots, but mostly it's private farmlands or small ranchettes. But I'm not going to talk about LiDAR too much unless anyone has questions. But this is how it works. Uh, you fly the plane and you get the returns. But here is the results of that LiDAR survey in the wildlife area. So here's parking lot G right here in the middle. This kind of purpley line that turns green is Putah Creek. Here's the tow drain, also called the Tule Canal over here. And the different colors are elevations. So this is purple's really low, red is really high, and green and yellow are in between. But you can see parking lot G is pretty high. It stays high and dry when a lot of this area is flooded around. And this just I could talk about this more, but I think we're going to keep going. So here we are down at parking lot G. Maybe you've seen these new signs that I think the Yolo Basin Foundation put in. They are great. I love seeing the creek get some signage because people when they're down there, bird watching or whatever they're doing, they don't know it's Putah Creek. It really doesn't look any different than a canal at this point. It's very straight, but that is where the salmon are coming up, and they're swimming right through the Yolo Bypass. Okay, so now let's go back. Now we've kind of oriented ourselves geographically. I wanted to go look at some historical photos. Did I spell historical right? So this is up at the Putah Diversion Dam where Lake Solano is. So about 7 miles downstream of the big dam. This is during construction in 1957. Off in the distance is Little Winters here. But looking at the general landscape, it's a lot of gravel. It's not very lush or like what we think of as riparian looking. So how does it look today? This is what it looks like today. You can't see Winters. It's completely filled with trees, and there's just the main point of this photo is that there's been some really big changes since the dam was built. And surprisingly, it didn't really dry things up. It actually, the way the dam is managed today, especially the result of the accord, is that there's more water in the summer and less flood flows. These huge torrential flood flows are now controlled by the dam, and so the trees don't get wiped out, and they get water all summer, and they just grow in thick. Here's another picture from the 1950s. This is pre-dam construction, 1955. This is in the Winters Car Bridge and the Winters Railroad Bridge. Now it's a pedestrian bridge. You can see underneath there's no trees. There was some clearing, but generally it's like this because it gets blasted out by 60,000 cubic feet per second. Flood flows, huge, huge raging rivers during flood times that are now controlled by the dam. But so
Excuse
here,
me, can I ask a question?
yeah,
Could you
please.
repeat could you repeat what the flood flow was? How big?
I was up to 60,000 CFS,
Six.
cubic feet
Oh
per
my
second.
gosh.
And now,
60,000.
yep, now the peak at post dam is about 12,000. I
Okay.
think there was one year it was like 14. And if you remember, like 2 years ago, we had a Glory Hole spill, and that was like 7 or 8,000, something like that.
60. Well,
Yeah, th thank you for interrupting. Actually, I recognize your voice. Who was that? Or I thought I did.
I don't think so. This is Chris
No.
Smith,
Oh,
Sacramento Area
okay.
Creeks Council. So,
Oh, okay. Hi, Chris.
hi.
You sound familiar. So standing on the bridge, on that railroad bridge, looking downstream, this is what Putah Creek looked like pre-dam construction. Big gravel bars, kind of alluvial braiding stream structure, tons of gravel that's, was mined. And this is what it looks like today. So I'm standing in the same spot. I took this picture with my phone. So looking downstream, what it looked like, quote, natural. And then here's what it looks like today. Very big difference. In fact, if you go up to Cache Creek, which doesn't have a Lake Berryessa on it, it still looks like this. If you go just, the Sparto Bridge and look downstream, it's just big gravel bars with a braided channel. And so Putah Creek and Cache Creek looked very similar, but after the construction of Berryessa, it changed. Oh, and this is, Peter Moyle. He's retired now, but he was a famous fish biologist from UC Davis, and he took this picture in 1974 when he started. When this is at Pedrick Road Bridge, and the university would go down and they need some gravel for a road or something or a project. They would just go down and scoop it out. And of course, he was dismayed and took some pictures. But that's the old way to manage the creek. We don't do that anymore. So more historic photos. Now we're moving downstream towards the wildlife area. This is in the flats. This is 1961, I think. I got my 1961. This is an irrigation diversion. We still have about 35 of these diversions on Putah Creek, and this electric pump looks like about a 20 horse. And this water right here is very interesting in the description. Uh, it's not from Putah Creek. The creek at this time of year had dried up, and which was common before the dam. It was considered a ephemeral stream and was turned perennial by the management of the dam. And this water is pumped in from the tow drain down, and the creek is used like as a canal for moving water around, and still is today. We'll talk about that more. So, oh, so historic photos. I'm going to bore you with historic documents, but this is a 1940 report. They did all these fishery studies of the creek before um, the dam construction, and basically what they found was Putah Creek was relatively warm and it dried up half the years. Didn't really support a big salmon run. Some salmon would come, one year there'd be a dozen or 20, and there'd be a couple years with, no salmon because there was no water, it was too warm. There was a fishery of salmon run, but it was quite small. And however, in the Yolo Bypass, moving down here at page 29 on this report, uh, Abe Woodward says that some 400 tons of salmon were bootlegged out of the Fremont Weir area. They had just constructed the Fremont Weir, I don't know, 10 years before 1925, I guess around 1915. And tens of thousands of fish were getting stranded behind those ponds, and we've tried to fix that with a big notch project. We're not going to talk about that, but you're welcome to ask questions. But 80,000, another part of this report says, oh, if we only had a cold water source for Putah Creek, it would be a great salmon fishery. And then I know Peter Moyle read that in 1980 or something, and he was like, we do have a cold water source. I don't know if anyone swum in the like at the fishing access points upstream of Winters towards the Monticello Dam. It is cold. It is really cold. And so we've basically got our surrogate snowpack, and yeah, so that got the wheels in his brain turning, right? About a future salmon run in Putah Creek. So that brings us to the Accord. So this isn't 2000, but before the year 2000, uh, portions of Putah Creek were drying out. And as I mentioned, this happened historically before the construction of Lake Berryessa in the 1950s. But after the 1950s, and especially starting in 1970, the Bureau of Reclamation decided to turn the creek into a perennial stream and decided to add water all the time. And it wasn't necessarily the natural pre-dam condition, but it was something that people wanted to do. And what it did is it promoted a lot of dependence on the creek for irrigation. So we've got studies that show the irrigation diversions increasing. So combined with increased irrigation diversions and the horrible, the drought in the 1990s, this looks like this photo's from 1989. The creek dried up again, and we had changed we were managing it to a different type of ecology, a perennial riparian stream, and so it's going dry, and people were upset about that, rightly so. So there's a lawsuit. I'll just finish the Putah Creek Accord. 10-year lawsuit to put water back in the creek and put more water in the creek for fish and to hire a streamkeeper. And Rich Maravich did that job before me for almost 20 years. And he retired, although he still works with us as a retired annuitant, and he still helps me a ton. But I've been the streamkeeper for the past 5 years. So any questions about that? I was going to move on to how the Accord gets implemented. I think a lot of people know about it. Um, so the so the lawsuit was settled in the year 2000, and part of the lawsuit was the extra water. And so we have minimum flow compliance locations, and there are three of them. One's at Putah Diversion Dam, one's at I-80, and one is down to tow drain. Okay, I'm going to be showing more and more graphs as the evening goes on, so get ready. This is just a typical year, January through December. And in the text of the Accord, these are the minimum flows they agreed to. This blue line, orange dotted line, and the green dotted line, those are the three minimum flow locations. And this is the CFS, cubic feet per second. If you have like 5 or 10 cubic feet per second, you could maybe float a canoe down that. And 30 or 40 is going to be decent, but still small stream. You know what Putah Creek looks like, I would think. But there are two other times of year where we do pulse flows, trying to mimic nature. We have a spring pulse flow where it starts at 150 CFS and then we ramp it down. And then we have a fall pulse flow, this red line over here, and that's for attracting the adult spawning salmon. And these are variable time periods. The minimum flows go up and then down. And the idea of this is we call it a functional flow. We're trying to mimic nature, but without using tons of water, mimic nature by using, 5 or 10% of the water and then use the rest for, agriculture in cities. And this concept was very new, kind of a big deal back in the day, 25 years ago. And it seems to be successful. So am I blocking the bottom here with I can't see it with the hide thumbnail video. Okay.
No, it all looks good.
Looks good. Okay. So this is the annual adult salmon returns in Putah Creek. So the Accord started in 2000. We were releasing extra water for salmon, but there's no salmon. 2004, no salmon. 2005, no salmon. There actually was salmon in 2003. I think maybe 60 showed up. But all these years with no salmon. And then starting around 2014 is when they started coming back. 500, 750, 1500. My son's commenting. Here you go. uh, let's see. Oh, and then here, this 2021, there was a low dissolved oxygen problem that we'll talk about. Maybe you heard about this big die off that was in the tow drain for the most part. And then we had our record years here. The difference in the colors, these dotted bars are just estimates. We didn't have official counts. In fact, in 2022, this 1,000 reporters said, "How many salmon are in the creek this year?" And I said, "Oh, maybe 1,000." So that became the official number. But uh, but now we're counting them one by one, and I'll talk about how we do that. And we had record returns last year. But why did it take so long for them to come back? We had the water in the creek, but we needed to do the other things. We're going to talk about the Los Rios check dam at parking lot G. That needs to be timed. We need to time the pulse flows. We need to remove barriers to fish passage. We did almost $25 million of restoration near the Winters Putah Creek Nature Park and other areas. And when we did all that, that's when the salmon started coming. So it's more than just the water. Okay, any questions about the cord or the numbers of salmon? I'm going to go into a photo tour of Lower Putah Creek. Okay, hey Hugo, I'm talking to like 30 people right now. Okay. So no questions? Am I still
No, you got a
here?
hand up.
Okay.
W. Anderson should be able to unmute.
Yes, thank you. Will Anderson here.
Hey,
Uh,
Will.
can you describe a little bit more the restorations that you just touched on, the extent of the restoration and the type that you think was the most helpful, please?
Sure. Let's get to a map here. So uh, here's Davis, and then here's the wildlife area, and here's Winters. This upper area is where the water is much colder as it's released from the dam, quite cold, perfect for salmon. It starts warming up as you go downstream. And then amazingly, right, there's like a line here right around Davis between like Pedrick Road and I-80 where everything changes. Uh, the water becomes warm enough, and we've got 35 years of fish sampling, resident fish, not the migratory salmon, but the fish that live there all the time. Uh, Upstream on Winters, it's all natives. Downstream, like Davis and downstream, it's all exotics and invasives. And the story is, and I think it's correct, is that it's just a water temperature difference. We've got the cold water up here that's good for the natives, and the warm water down here that's good um, for the exotics. So what we did up here in this colder area was started doing channel geomorphic changes. For example, under the the railroad bridge at Winters, there was a large pond there that was like a warming basin. And what we did is we went in and redid the channel so that it was no longer a big, slow-moving pond with high residence times. We turned it into a narrow, quick-flowing channel, and that allowed propagation of cold water farther downstream, opened up that habitat for salmon, and actually generated spawning habitat but right below that bridge, and opened it up. That's one example. The other big changes were the barriers to fish passage. The Los Rios check dam that we'll talk about in a few minutes. 106A is another barrier, and then not just physical barriers of boards and concrete, but like physiochemical barriers of low dissolved oxygen. And as we you know propagate the cold water downstream, narrow the channel, provide more shading, it's easier to shade a narrower channel than a 1,000-foot wide channel and reduce the temperatures. Does that help, Will? Oh, Chris Smith is raising their hand.
Yes, thank
Yeah,
you.
sorry, I stepped out of the room for a minute, and you may have mentioned this, but what about gravel and sediment, and how the sediment may have built up, and the gravel needs for the fries? Did you guys
Yeah, so
work on any of that?
we do. In fact, that's one of my main activities right now is gravel augmentation. So gravel naturally comes down in big flood flows, that 60,000 CFS. And with the dam there now, those high flows aren't there, and it's, quote, gravel starved. And so new gravel isn't showing up, and a bunch of it's been mined over the years. Uh, we do two strategies for gravel habitat work. One is called scarification, or the fluffing of gravel. So there is still gravel in the creek, but it isn't being moved around by the high flows anymore. So it cements together. And we just take, under permit, we take an excavator down there and dig it up and fluff it back up. And that allows the salmon to use that gravel where it was impenetrably rock hard before. And that is very successful. That's another one of the main things that we started doing. I don't know how the salmon could have sensed that the gravel was fresher, but certainly the timing is coincidental. The second thing we do for gravel management is gravel augmentation. We bring in dumped up gravel and dump it in the creek and spread it around in a special way, and the salmon use that. It's we've documented that they love it. We purchase the right sizes and deposit it in the creek bottom, and we're going to do more and more of that as the years go on. And we did a test 3 years ago of, I think it was maybe 80 cubic yards, which is only, 10 drum truck loads. And then this past year, we did about 400 cubic yards, and we're going to do 400 to 1,000 cubic yards every year for the next 5, 10 years. Other other questions? My son has a question. What's your question? Oh, he has. Yeah. Okay, going back to the Accord flows. Yeah. Okay.
No.
So, shall we do the photo tour of Putah Creek below I-80? So, the upper sections with the cold water and where a lot of the habitat work has been done is more appealing to researchers and funders, and it looks prettier. But when we go downstream of I-80, that has been historically not seen as much love. We haven't had as much grant funded projects, as much restoration. And so my job today is to work on the lower part of the creek more, just put more emphasis down below I-80. So I'm just going to see what it looks like. So this is Putah Creek going through these two culverts at 106A. This is like a private farm crossing. And this was a barrier to fish passage. The fish can't jump up this culvert, and they look kind of rusty too. I wouldn't want to do that anyway. But we recently put in a smaller culvert to the side that's much lower. And for the past 3 years, 100% of all the salmon, the thousands of salmon, have swum through this little 36-inch plastic culvert that we installed. Oh, here I am standing on the Los Rios check dam, parking lot G in the wildlife area, and there are salmon swimming up the creek right when I took this picture. This is October 14th. This is a couple years old now, but you can also see the meandering pattern in the aquatic vegetation. This is Asian water primrose, and this is getting a lot worse now. It's actually, plants will consume oxygen at night. So they make oxygen during the day, but at night they consume oxygen. And last year we had about 30 salmon waiting for the boards to come out, and the oxygen went low everywhere, and they died. So we have a control plan in place for this year to work on removing some of this biological material. Um, so this is the Los Rios
Oh,
check dam.
a question
Yeah,
on that.
yeah.
When you talk about low oxygen,
Mhm.
um, uh, uh, for how long can a salmon survive in that low oxygen condition? Can they go a mile and get out of that, or swim a mile or something?
Well, as it goes down, so this this picture shows kind of an open path going through, it you couldn't see any water at all for, a mile. It was
Oh,
just completely clogged with it. We were surprised that so many salmon had made it to this clear area right below the check dam. And y- I don't know the exact numbers of how long they can survive at certain temps, but UC Davis ran down there and measured the dissolved oxygen, and it was near zero. So they're not going to last long in that. If you're getting below 3 milligrams per liter, if you know dissolved oxygen units, that's getting in the danger zone. Two, maybe they could 2 milligrams per liter, they would make it overnight. But if you're down to zero, they're not
yeah.
going to last very long at all.
Okay. And another question, please.
Yeah.
You're calling the Los Rios check dam. Is that, I mean, this looks like there's no dam here, but is it, you're saying it's boards or it's, oh,
Yeah.
got
So there's another picture of it.
okay.
So this is the normal up. So there's the bridge that you might know at parking lot G. There's a little picnic table and a porta potty down there that I showed with the sign. And so these are the boards that go in to check up the water. You see this little turnout right here, this little
Yep.
valve. So by gravity, that goes and floods, 800 acres of duck habitat. And, that's a good thing. And this is a long historic use here. This has happened, many, many years. And in addition to flooding duck habitat, a lot of the farming depends on it too. Rice, cattle, tomatoes, corn, Sudan grass, up and down the creek. This dam propagates, high water levels back many miles because it's so flat. And so everyone depends on this. They have pumps. And so what we've got this balance now to try to, now that there's kind of a new salmon run, it's only been here for the past 10 years, and these diversions have been here for 60, 80 years. We want to keep everyone whole. We want to get the best of both worlds and let the salmon through and divert the water. And we're right in the middle of a planning project right now with the wildlife area with CDFW to figure out like a fish ladder solution.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much. Very interesting. Thank
Yeah, so here's another view of the check dam. That's what it looks like from the fish see that. They're not going to jump over that, right? Uh but this is removable. So all these boards can come out and these posts come out and they do come out in the winter to allow the flood flows to come through. So, if we can get this out in October, then the salmon can get through, but sometimes it's needed until November or even early December for flooding duck habitat or for rice decomposition or other uses. And so we have to work together to figure it out. Yeah, and so here I am. This is kind of good. So Los Rios check dam and the fish ladder. Oh, this is working out well. So just a overview map. The check dam is basically right smack in the middle of the wildlife area. Yep, and there's Corinne, my daughter, and she's standing on top of the check dam. And so this is the situation where the fish can't jump up that. So this green bar represents the boards, and downstream the water's level's 2 feet, and upstream it's 8 or even 10 feet. And so how are they going to jump over that? Well, Mark Guard, he's a PhD engineer, fish passage biologist engineer guy. He works for CDFW, and he said, "Well, why don't you just make a fish ladder temporarily while you're waiting to figure out the permanent fish ladder out of wood?" And he sent us this picture, and he sent us the designs, and this is only like a 2 or 3 foot drop, and we've got an 8 or 10 foot drop, but we went for it anyway. Oh, so here's a cartoon of what it would look like for the fish to get up. over the Los Rios check dam, and we put one together. We just kind of figured it out. One of the shop guys said, I can build that. And we did. We built it out of metal and wood, and we swung it in. We had to tuck it underneath this bridge, and boy, were we nervous. I think there's like some kind of wheels or something. I can't really tell, but it turned out the thing floats. So it was super easy to just float over. But there was one part that wasn't easy, and that was all these legs. I think this is a video. So bolting these legs together and putting in the wood like underwater for a couple days. It was cold. Everyone was really proud of what we'd done, but it was not easy. And so we went to do that again last year. And the main guy that designed it had left the water agency, and his main assistant had also left to, go to other jobs. And so the guys that were left were like, we don't know how to do it, and it was really hard, and we think it's dangerous. And we were like, okay, let's not do that. So what we did last year is we just pulled the boards early, and that was okay because it was the timing of the season worked where the wildlife area was able to get started early enough to divert the water they needed for the duck habitat, and the farmers were okay with it. There's about 5 different farming operations that share the costs and benefits of the Los Rios check dam, and they all agreed. And so when we pulled the boards out, I think it was around October 20th, yeah, we had our record run. So that really works. But it's not going to work every year because some years we need to keep the check dam in much later, and the salmon are already there. Yeah, any more questions about that?
Yeah, Max, I have a question.
Sure.
It's Bob Traverso and Davis. So what is that ladder you used only 1 year? Is that what you said?
Yeah, we were planning on using it, reinstalling it for 3 or 4 years, and uh, it was just too hard and dangerous to install. Can you imagine like bolting underwater
And is there some reason why you
for
can't leave
hours?
it there? Is there some reason why it can't stay there?
Yeah. So in the wintertime, we still might have, like 2 years ago, 8,000 CFS. All the boards need to come out, and anything that's in the channel itself needs to come out because the debris load that comes down during rain runoff events piles up in front. Actually got caught in 2001 with an early storm, and it just causes a huge mess and can threaten the structure itself, the bridge crossing. And yeah, so everything comes out every winter. And in fact, so we were thinking, oh, well, we just need a better system that's easier to deploy, like lunar lander legs. We press a button and the legs could come out and we could swing it in. So we talked to Yolo Erectors out of Woodland. They build scaffoldings and conveyor belts and stuff for ag and mining industry. And they said, yep, we can do that. And so they sharpened their pencils, and they were going to build it out of all metal and have these extendable legs that were, you didn't have to bolt them underwater. And they wanted $250,000, which was, actually, if it was a permanent solution, that would be cheap. But just for a year or two, that was going to be kind of expensive. And then part of the issue of a removable structure is that you only get a couple days notice when the storm is coming, and you have to pull it out really fast. And if you're using a crane, that adds some complexity, and so that solution wasn't working.
So when you take it out, it's not reusable again if it's all that metal construction that they were talking about?
Yeah, the metal one was. It was just too expensive for the number of years that we would use it.
Well, what was the life expectancy of that ladder?
Well, we're hoping to have what's called a northern bypass solution, which is a channel going around it, like a natural fish ladder, and hopefully that'll be constructed in 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
So it would be 4 or 5 years. But it's not just the $250,000 for construction and procurement, but the renting of the crane twice a year and
Right.
all that.
I understand. Okay, thank you.
Hmm. Yeah, I was really hoping that the wooden fish ladder was going to be our stopgap measure because it was only like, 10 grand worth of materials. It wasn't, I mean, there was a lot of, shop labor, but those were guys that already worked for the water agency, so it wasn't any extra cost, and except for the materials. But we still have it. If you need a fish ladder, let me know. Because we got it sitting in our storage yard.
Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, because it's too hard to put in. Other questions? Oh, is this a video too? No. But it was pretty exciting getting it in and having the salmon go up it. Okay, so we'll move on to what time is it? How are we doing here?
It's
Oh,
7:43.
okay. Well, I'm only halfway through my slides. Uh, Counting baby salmon. So everyone, I'm in the line at the supermarket with my salmon shirt on, and people always want to know, how many salmon, how many salmon, but they want to know how many adult salmon there are. But it's really important to count the baby salmon too, because they're the ones that, swim out and come back. So I want to talk about that. So here's the UC Davis team, and behind them is a special trap for counting migratory fish out in the middle of a stream called a rotary screw trap. This is how it works. It's like a pontoon boat with this little screw, the rotary screw, and then this box in the back is where the salmon get caught, and you go out, every day or twice a day, and you pull the baby salmon out and you count them, and that's what they look like. That's a pretty big one. That's like 110 millimeters. So some years we'll catch 30,000 of those in the rotary screw trap. This year, I think we might catch even more because we had such a big run of adults. Hopefully they laid a bunch of eggs and hatch out these baby salmon. So what do we, besides counting them, what else do we do? Oh, we do surgery on them. We cut them open and we insert a transmitting tracking device with a battery and a speaker, and then sew them back up again. And it's a computer. It's the size of a large grain of rice, and it sends out a code like with sonar, like a submarine, and then we put a series of receivers down the creek. Here's Winters, Davis, and Los Rios Check Dam. I think there's 11 of them here to log how far the babies get and if they make it down to the tow drain. So the RST, this is rotary screw trap near Winters. This is where we do the surgery out in the field. And then, we hold them in a bucket, make sure we didn't, kill them. And they're usually just fine. And then they swim down and you can see how far they make it. And I promised more graphs, so here you go. So here's the results. And this is really important for the wildlife area. This result, Garrett and I have talked about this graph a bunch. This is 2021, so we put 170 of these little battery powered transmitters into 170 baby fish and let them go. So, down at the Russell Ranch, by the UC Davis Farm research area, we lost maybe 20% or 18%. And then we lost another 20% down towards Old Davis Road. And then, you keep losing a little bit and a little bit more. They get eaten by, oh, my son's asking how come it gained from the Beaver Dam to Mesa Boulevard. That's because some of them slipped by the receiver and didn't get logged. So that's an error, right? But generally they catch most of them. But then going down to the check dam. So here's upstream of check dam and downstream of check dam. We lose like 80% of them all at once. We go from 17 to like this big chunk. We're very concerned, and we are working all sorts of different ways for the fish ladder, for the adult fish to come up. We're moving the boards and counting the fish, and but boy, not only is it a barrier to up migrating adults, it's a barrier to out migrating juveniles. And that's something, there's barriers the whole way, predation, but the check dam is one of the major ones. And if if they make it out past the check dam, they make it all the way to almost to the Golden Gate, out the Benicia Bridge there. And this happens in a day. Once they make it out into the tow drain, they are jamming towards the ocean because there's a series of statewide receivers that use the same frequencies, and they can detect them down at Benicia, our little baby Putah Creek fish that are, a couple inches long. So any questions about counting baby salmon? I'm going to talk about counting adult salmon, which is more interesting, right?
Max, one question. What time of year are the baby salmon going down?
Oh, I thought I had a graph. I think I have a graph coming up. Where is it? Oh, I took it out. Oops, and now the slideshow's over. They're coming out now, March, April, May, in the spring. So the baby salmon go out in the spring, April, May, March, April, May, and the adults come in, October, November. So, go back. Yeah, I'm sure this is the most slides I've ever had in a presentation before. Okay, counting baby salmon. Okay, any other questions about baby salmon? Okay. So moving on to adults, where the action is. Okay, so what we do is we have this fence with a box, and we put it across the creek, or we put it in, but UC Davis runs it, and so every single salmon gets funneled into this cone here and into this trap, and then 3 or 4 times a day, the researchers go down and count the salmon and let them go, and I'll show you a video of that. Yeah, sometimes if the water level's really high. Yeah.
I realize that I have a question about the baby salmon.
Oh, yeah.
Where are they getting most of their food that, helps them gain size? Is there really a lot of food in Putah Creek?
Yeah, Putah Creek is pretty good. There's a couple things that I noticed just looking around. The benthic macroinvertebrates that they're eating a lot of, in the bugs in the gravel, we keep adding more of that. And then the floodplain access. So the channel over time has become incised. Like I was talking about the big ponds that are heating. There's also areas where the channel is a little bit deep. There's, a couple feet of bank. And so when pulse flows come down, they don't necessarily pop out of the bank and flood the areas to the sides. But when we create new habitat, we purposely make the channel small and not very deep so that when pulse flows do come down, they can hop out into the floodplain. And that's only, 6 inches deep on 100 feet on either side of the creek. That is amazing. So, in my job, I walk down to the creek and I look in the water, and you might see some fish or something. That's normal. But if you walk down to the creek during floodplain access, when the water is popped out and is making these puddles, these 6-inch flooded areas on either side, it is amazing. There are bugs and fish jumping everywhere. It is a huge noticeable difference when there's floodplain access, and that's really where they can get a lot. I mean, we need to have more of that habitat, and that's part of my job too.
Excellent, thank you.
And then we'll talk about floodplain fatties in a second, because more rearing habitat down in the Yolo Bypass.
You also had a question about in chat. Do the baby salmon live in the flooded rice for a while?
Yeah, I've got a whole bunch of slides on that. We'll talk about that in a minute. And normally they cannot get into the flooded rice fields, but I might be able to skip ahead. So this is floodplain fatties. This is a story. So this is 10-year-old news now, but Jacob Katz and others at Cal Trout and maybe he did this as a student, did an experiment where they took the baby salmon and they put them in a cage, and they put some of the cages in the Sacramento River and just let them grow up in the cage. And they put some in a drainage canal, and they put some in agricultural floodplain wetland, which is a rice field. And and look at the size difference. I mean, this for the same age, same date, I mean, they're almost twice as big and in terms of weight. And that correlates directly with survival. So if they are bigger, they're faster, have greater stores, and they make it out and come back at higher rates. And this is demonstrated in many other studies that bigger fish are better. So if our Putah Creek fish, for example, if they're leaving right now, and which they probably aren't quite yet, it's maybe another month, the bypass is, the Yolo Bypass wildlife area is partially flooded right now. There's tons of flooded habitat down there. Not only that, but it gives more varied and dispersed habitat to avoid predators. So you've got more food and less concentration of your exotic predators, waiting to munch you as you move downstream. Let's see, so I'm gonna go back. There's Rich Marovich. He's the Streamkeeper Emeritus. But this is the oh, and please interrupt with any other questions or ask. You won't be interrupting. So this is the adult counting weir. There's Rich. So the researchers go here, and let's see. Do we have a? Oh, so we also have a camera, an underwater camera, to count the fish. It uses AI. It's not working perfectly yet. It's underestimating by 20 or 30% versus the counts in the counting weir. But yeah, this is what they look like. It's pretty exciting. So if you want to go down and see some salmon in Putah Creek, you can try to catch them down in the wildlife area, but they're just passing through, right? So they're swimming pretty fast. It's unlikely you'll see many unless you spend hours down there. But if you go farther upstream, one of the best places is at the Winners Putah Creek Railroad Bridge. You can see them from the bridge. You don't even have to go down to the water. You'll hear them before you see them. You'll be like, is that a dog playing in the creek? And it's the fish jumping around. And another good place is at Pedrick Road, closer to Davis, and go upstream about 500 yards on the trail and hang out there for 5 or 10 minutes after Halloween, and you'll see some salmon swimming in the water. Oh, maybe it is. Oh, and then here's the location. So the wooden fish ladder down in the bypass, and the counting weirs up on campus. Oh, and I don't know why I wanted to talk about this again, but we don't have to. We're getting kind of out of time, right? Yeah, it's almost 8 o'clock. Jeez. So let's talk about timing in the bypass. So the adult salmon, when do they show up? This is very important for when to remove the boards in the check dam. So if we want to, keep everyone whole, we need to flood duck habitat, we need to do farming, but sometimes that might be in November. Well, if we wait till the end of November to remove the boards, most of the salmon have showed up already in October, November. And this is CPUE, catch per unit effort, because sometimes they, sample for 12 days and some days for 5 days. And so you want to normalize that. But basically they start showing up in September, peaking October, November. And by December, they're pretty much not coming in anymore. That's the fall run. This is 25 years of data from the Tow Drain Fish Monitoring Program from DWR. What else? What does what say? Oh, Department of Water Resources, my son is asking. So Putah Creek salmon management priorities. This is from a document. We're not going to read all this, obviously, but number 1, barriers to fish passage, managing those better. Number 2, working on high juvenile predation. Those transmitter studies where you put the rice grain sized computer in the stomach of the baby salmon, lack of spawning gravel, high water temperatures and low dissolved oxygen problems, and then the pulse flow, attraction, timing, and magnitude. So of these 5 main salmon management priorities for Putah Creek, 4 of them are all in the wildlife area. The barriers to fish passage. Not only do we have Los Rios check dam, but upstream we have 106A. So those need to be managed together. Even though we put in that fish pipe, it still has boards during irrigation season. High juvenile predation. We got to do something about getting the juveniles out past the check dam. High water temperature and low dissolved oxygen. That's, we talked about that with the Asian water primrose. Oops. And then the pulse flow, traction, and timing. We don't send a traction pulse flow down unless the boards are out of the check dam. And so if we don't take the boards out and send the pulse flows down, one will send a bunch of debris on the check dam, but also will track some salmon and they won't be able to get over the board. So that's a coordinated timing thing. The pulse flow for fall attraction and removal of the check dam happen at the same time. So almost, 4 of our 5 main salmon management priorities are focused on the downstream part of Putah Creek, and they're mostly in the wildlife area and upstream up towards Mace Boulevard. And there's we picked our low-hanging fruit for the first 20 years upstream, worked on the salmon spawning habitat, worked on propagating cold water downstream, worked on some other issues up there, and flow measurement, all sorts of things. And now we're starting to work on the rest of the system. And okay. So to wrap things up, the Yolo Bypass and so not Putah Creek juvenile salmon. This relates to Jeanette's question. There's a lot of salmon that are out migrating from the Sacramento River system, and traditionally they've been cut off from the floodplain habitat, right? Unless the Fremont Weir is spilling, but they're channeled into the Sacramento River, which has less food for them to eat. The floodplain fatty stories, and so we want to get them into the rice fields. And well, how do we do that? Okay, that's the floodplain fatty story. So listen to this. This is amazing. There's a group called the Bridge Group, which is farmers and commercial salmon fishermen got together and said, well, we all want commercial salmon fishery. Let's work with the state, the hatcheries, and see what we can do better. So normally at a fish hatchery, you take the eggs and the sperm and you raise your baby fish and you put them in the river at the fish hatchery, and so they know where to come back. But a bunch of them get munched. Some of these are way north. Coleman is up kind of near Shasta, and they were to replace the spawning habitat that was blocked by the dams. Anyway, past 5-10 years, during drought or poor conditions otherwise, the state has been trucking the salmon, the baby salmon, out to the bay and or other places in the Delta. I'm not sure exactly where, but trucking them far, hundreds of miles away from the hatchery and putting them in and boy, did they get better returns. It was a huge impact. But there's a little bit of a problem. They tend to get lost. So when they're coming back as adults, they don't really know how to get back as well. And so there's more strays. But anyway, this has been a successful strategy. What they did this year, just a couple weeks ago, or I don't know, 6 weeks ago now, January 20th and 23rd, they took 1 million baby salmon fry. Instead of dumping them in the river or dumping them in the bay, they put them right into some rice fields. And they did it twice. They did it at another section of a little farther north. They did it at Conway Ranch and Nags Ranch, I think, at another 1 million. So they put 2 million baby salmon directly into this primo flooded rice habitat that will make them grow even bigger and get them closer to getting out to the ocean. And the bypass flooded just right now. So it's kind of like a perfect storm. I don't know what's going to happen in 2 or 3 years, when these adults come back, but we might have a big return of salmon coming up the tow drain and wanted to come into Putah Creek. I mean, we might even be putting the boards back in and saying, trying to keep them out because there'd be too many, might be clogging no, I don't know what's going to happen. But, this is one of those hindsight strategies like, oh, why don't we think of this before? This is a good idea. And I think it might have a dramatic impact. 2 million fish getting grown, puffed up superhero size on like floodplain fatties do, and then coming back. What else?
Hey, Max.
Yeah.
This is Stephen McCord. How you doing?
Hey, Stephen. Good.
I got a question. At the upper end of the bypass, there's the change in flows now with the lower passage, all that. Do you anticipate, like what you were just talking about, maybe diverting the salmon not coming up? That's where they would go now, right? And they come before.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. So what's your question?
Well, have you considered the impacts of that on the salmon coming up Putah Creek versus continuing on up the bypass?
Oh, well, so there's two things that happen. One, these extra fish, they're going to be attracted to come up because of our pulse flows is what we think. So what happened sort of up here is actually right here is the Wallace Weir Fish Rescue Facility, where salmon used to come up the tow drain and then would swim up the ridge cut and then get caught in the Colusa Basin drain. And there's no spawning habitat up there. That's kind of a death trap. So, hundreds of salmon were going up the Colusa Basin drain. So about 10 years ago, they put a barrier called the Wallace Weir was always there, but they put a fish barrier in and a fish barrier rescue facility. Or maybe this is what you're talking about, Stephen. So now that we have the counting weir on Putah Creek, we can show what the daily arrivals are of salmon. And so we do the pulse flow, we get a bunch of salmon coming up every day, and then we stop the pulse flow, and 2 days later, no more fish show up. Well, but at the Wallace Weir, that's when they start showing up. And we've only looked at 1 year of this, so, one example doesn't prove the case. But what it looks like is the fish are being attracted up to Putah Creek by our pulse flow. We turn the pulse flow up, and then the fish don't know where to go, and they keep swimming up to the Wallace Weir. So we're initiating a genetic study. All the fish for the past 15 years at the Wallace Weir have genetic samples on ice in the deep freeze, and we're going to go back in time and do a retrospective analysis on those samples to see if any of those fish over the past years have been lost to Putah Creek fish, which is kind of exciting. The other thing, couple other things that might happen. Yeah, if we have all from this, this release of the 2 million fry in the bypass, there's going to be a ton of extra fish coming in, and I think we'll have quite large returns for fish coming up Putah Creek if they are in the tow drain. They'll be attracted by our pulse flow. The other thing, maybe you're talking about the big notch, the fish flows at the Fremont Weir.
Yeah.
Yeah. So up here at the top of the Yolo Bypass is the Fremont Weir. That's what overtops during floods to flood the bypass. Now we as a community, the state has installed a notch in the weir to allow fish passage and water, and it opens and closes, and they can manage it different ways. But basically, they want to flood the bypass more often for beneficial fish habitat, and send more water down and allow fish passage out of the bypass. They used to get trapped behind the weir, and so now any salmon that do come up and used to try to get up the Wallace Weir, and then they had to trap them and truck them, and now presumably they'll be able to continue swimming through this notch in the Fremont Weir and continue on up the Sacramento River. So that should be a good thing. The other thing is out migrating juveniles can also get access to the floodplain habitat in the bypass when it's operating. When the notch is open, it isn't open all the time, and it isn't low enough sometimes, but it will operate more, and it opens up all of this floodplain habitat for the baby salmon to grow bigger in, and that could be huge too. Does that answer what you were going at?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, but there's been a bunch of fighting and lawsuits about the big notch. Basically, this is all private land in here except for the wildlife area, and people farm it, and there's a flood easement on it, and they accept that and work around that and don't have buildings or anything there to get flooded. But if they're going to get flooded more often, they might not be able to plant their rice or tomatoes or whatever they're growing in there. And that's a huge impact. That's a takings. They want more salmon habitat too, but they don't want to, get their livelihood taken away or have the value of their land taken away. So they've been fighting about that. So they split the baby and, tried to figure out how to compensate the landowners, how to compensate the loss in tax revenue for the counties, how to, make infrastructure changes to ameliorate the additional flooding. So, I'm not an expert on this, but
Max,
that's kind of,
I have a question.
yeah,
Max, I have a question.
go ahead.
Are you doing something similar where the American River weir is to provide access for the fish coming and going that are going up the American and Feather rivers?
I'm very Putah Creek centric. I do, talk to the other managers. The American River in particular, has Nimbus Fish Hatchery, and my understanding is that they don't get past that, but I might be wrong on that. But what they are doing is downstream of Nimbus is a ton of restoration work where they are moving hundreds of thousands of cubic yards of gravel back into the stream. They're taking it from all the mining tailings and they're washing and sorting it and putting it back in. These dump trucks that they use are mining dump trucks. They're 5 times bigger than a dump truck you'll see on the road, and they go in two at a time, and they drive for a whole month all day long, putting gravel back in the creek, and it totally works. They're putting in.
I'm talking about the weir right there by where the American River comes into the Sacramento River. That the weir opens up and water can go into the Yolo.
That right here, the Sacramento Weir.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yes, they are. The state is constructing some sort of a bypass there. They're actually widening and modernizing the whole thing because I don't know if you've seen the videos. They pop the boards with that cable thing, and they can't put them back. So once it's open for the season, they can't close it until the water's gone down. And so that they're redoing the whole thing. And yes, there is some kind of passage there. I saw a talk on it a couple of months ago, but I'm not recalling the details. But major improvements there too.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Max, I have a question that's water quality related.
Okay.
This is Jeanette. And this is kind of about survival of the little ones. I think I have either read or heard that a lot of us feel like water quality, we want better water quality, which means clearer, more transparent water. But I have either read or heard that you get better little survival of the small ones if the water is more opaque, more cloudy, because they're hidden. They're harder to see, harder to find for predators and stuff. So I wondered if anything related to that is going on with some of the work that you're doing.
Well, sediment can be good or bad. We need sediment. It's natural. The stream needs it. But for example, if it's smothering gravel beds and not allowing the eggs to hatch, that's bad. Or if it's increasing, maybe it's sediment with higher organic matter content and is decreasing the dissolved oxygen, things like that. Particularly for delta smelt, I understand the cloudy water helps a lot. The main issues that we deal with in Putah Creek and the tow drain, which is, it's an extension of Putah Creek, that's where the salmon come up, is the dissolved oxygen. And that's an issue for with flushing flows, that it's like a backwater, so any organic material that does get in there and consumes oxygen doesn't get flushed out. And the temperatures, so it's not flowing, it's just sitting there baking in the sun. all fall, with very low flows. And that's really what we need to work on. In the wildlife area, there's maybe 30 plus lift pumps that are pulling water out of the tow drain and moving it around for farming and for duck habitat. That water is Sacramento River water that, started up north, and it comes, past Knight's Landing, goes all the way down uh, to Rio Vista, and then does a U-turn, and then comes up the Cache Slough complex, and then goes another 30 miles back up, and then is pumped out of the tow drain. What I would like to see is, either using the Big Notch or other pathways of like running K-log Knight's Landing outfall gates backwards, bring that Sacramento River water in that's being used anyway, and bring it down inside the Yolo Bypass and improve water quality, improve temperatures, improve dissolved oxygen. But also, if you put it on the west side, it'll be higher, and you'll save hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars a month in pumping costs because you can deliver it by gravity. I mean, we let it go all the way down to Rio Vista and then come, it's like a 60-mile U-turn, and it's really just a half mile away on the other side of the levee. And why not bring it in and serve it directly? And if you brought it in at Knight's Landing, you would have enough head to have a head ditch on the west side of the Yolo Bypass. I'm sorry if I'm geeking out here. The ag people will know what I'm talking about. But
I
but then
totally
you don't have to
do.
run pumps. You
Yes.
can just gravity feed it. And even if you only had half of the deliveries gravity fed, I mean,
It would save a lot. Yeah.
it would save a lot. It would improve water quality. It would reduce your carbon footprint because of all this pumping, and it would save a ton of money. I talked to, the farmers, and they're like, you should do that, Max. But, that's a really
Yeah.
big project. But just another idea.
Great.
But the
Thanks.
main issue is dissolved oxygen. The
Thank
water
you.
temperatures during the fall, during the fall migration of the adults is too warm.
That's the bigger issue.
That's
Great.
big. And it's
Thanks a bunch.
okay. And
Yeah.
other questions?
Yeah,
And-
you had another one that came in on chat. It's how can we as citizens help protect and support your work?
Oh, that's a good question. If you want to get your hands dirty, you can talk to Putah Creek Council. They've got all kinds of volunteer days, with planting native plants and trash cleanup, and you can, work through them and support them financially as a nonprofit, similar to the Yellow Basin Foundation. But in terms of what the state priorities are in terms of how they fund this type of work and how they prioritize the regulatory environment. The we already do a pretty good job of that. The people have spoken. We want salmon, we want habitat, we want good quality air and water, and we're kind of a leader in the nation in that regard. There's a lot of work to do, but we're heading in the right direction. The main thing that's happening right now, and this is a crazy issue, and I don't know, what the average citizen can do, but just knowing about it as a start is it's called green tape. You know how there's red tape, like bureaucratic complications. So all this permitting, like if you're going to build a chemical factory or an airport or a bridge or something, uh, you got to get all these environmental permits and environmental impact reports and flood permits and all these other permits. And that's, maybe it's too much or maybe it's not, I don't know, but it's, generally a good thing to protect the environment. We have these restoration projects. I might get a $750,000 grant to do, a couple acres of salmon habitat. It's pretty cheap. You drive a bulldozer around, you move the fish, you kind of, do the engineering. But the permitting, for example, a recent project that we're working on, it's 3 years behind schedule, and we've already spent over $400,000 just on the permits, and we don't even have all the permits yet. So cutting the green tape is this big issue because the restoration projects are caught in the regulatory machinery for, building an oil refinery or, a freeway expansion, things that definitely are going to impact the environment, and we should do everything we can to, do it the best we can. But these restoration projects that are to benefit the environment and typically are much lower budget, very, putting in some pipes in a different way or planting some plants, they're pretty low cost. We're spending 50 or 75% of our budget just on the permitting. Do you want your tax dollars going that way? I don't. I'd rather see it on the ground. And you do need some oversight. There's incidental damage, like let's say I'm cutting down an invasive tree, a eucalyptus or something, but that's, habitat for a nesting hawk, so you want to do it at the right time. So that there are certain things you need to do, but do you need $400,000 or $500,000 worth of permitting for $300,000 worth of construction? I don't know if that's the best thing. So to answer your question, I'm not sure what, Joe Citizen on the street can do, but being, because I'm supportive of regulations to protect the environment, but something went off the rails here, and now we got to. Looks like Maya or Mia wants to.
Mia, yeah.
Mia.
Well, first, I really appreciate the part of how we can get our hands dirty. That's fantastic. That's good to know, and I'll look for those opportunities. Are you referring to the CEQA process?
Yeah, well, it's a matrix of regulatory.
Okay.
Yeah, there's Central Valley Flood Board and the California Fish and Wildlife and NOAA and Section 7 and the Army Corps and CEQA, and it's probably a dozen different permits for, restoration project.
Yeah. Fairly familiar with some of that.
Yeah.
I understand the complexity of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
And I think sometimes maybe we just don't need to get a permit for it. But if you ask the regulatory agency, they always say yes, right? Because that's their job. Of course you need a permit. But
right.
maybe we don't. And then there's these cutting the green tape programs that are being initiated, decreed by the governor, and but it hasn't trickled down to my projects yet. Not helping yet. I mean, but awareness is the first step, right? That we got to work on this, and so hopefully we can do things. Maybe I have unrealistic expectations of how fast things get done. I think, we can do that in a year or a couple months, and like 5 years later, we're still doing it. So, well, we're at 8:20. I think we're losing the couple. Well, no, most people are still here. 28. Thanks everyone for hanging in there with me. This is really fun. I appreciate the questions. That really helps, me have a better time, talking, because I feel like I'm, connecting with you guys. Oh, hey, Robin's here. Hey, Robin. Hey, wasn't that a picture of you in one of the? Wait, where is it? I thought in the historic photos. Robin, you help. Wait. Oh, there's too many slides. Oh, is that you, Robin? Oh, maybe you can't. Maybe I'm not sharing.
Yes, it's me with my son David in my backpack.
Yay!
Now 36 and working on wetland restoration in the Delta.
Amazing. And you're one of the founders of the Yolo Basin Foundation too, right, Robin?
Correct.
Oh, you're still at it.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, success is overflowing. I mean, you started you were a founding member of the Putah Creek Council, and I mean, look at all these salmon. Thank you for all that work back in it. I mean, you did it. It worked. It's amazing.
Yeah, there were a lot of good people working on it, and we're all just so happy to have the streamkeeper to actually get the work done.
Well, yeah. Thanks. It's
high expectations
yeah.
for you.
Yeah, Rich really set the bar pretty high. Rich Maravich, the previous streamkeeper. I learned a lot from him. He's a really good guy. Um, yeah, so Corky, I don't know if are there any other questions in the chat?
I don't see any other questions. Robin did put in a comment of support research on fisheries, water quality, and wetlands. So I assume that was in response to what can we as individual citizens do. Thank
Yep.
you, Max. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and for all of your work on the creek and the salmon and the health of the water. We appreciate it, and we appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us. Again, I want to remind people that next week, next month, we're going to have Garrett Spann talking about the work that's being done in the Yolo Bypass wildlife area. And also hope to see you all at California Duck Days, the end of April. So thank you, Max. Thanks for all that you're doing.